Hi friends, welcome back to Parnika tutorials. In this video, I want to discuss what is the need for binding the event handlers, and then I will discuss what are the various ways we can bind the event handlers in React. So I sincerely request everyone to watch the complete video for better understanding. If you have used the JavaScript before, then you are familiar with this keyword and how it works. If you don't bind this keyword with the event handler, then it will point to an undefined in the callback. This is the JavaScript specific behavior and it is not related to the React. So in React.js, we need to bind events so that this keyword would not return an undefined. Let me discuss with a simple scenario what is the problem with the JavaScript related to this keyword. So what I will do, I will display some message called welcome to Parnika tutorials, and I will have a button. Once the user clicks that button, I want to display the message as thank you for visiting the Parnika tutorials. To do all these things, I will go to the Visual Studio. In the Visual Studio components, let me create a new file and I will give the name of the file as event.bind.ex.js. Let me have a class component in the event.bind.ex.js. So I will use the React snippet to create a class component. If you want to create a class component using the React snippet, you need to type RCE and press enter. Now you can see we have one class component called event.bind.ex. You need to remove this export keyword. And then let me save the event.bind.ex.js and then let me go to the app.js. I need to import the event.bind.ex. So let me write event.bind.ex from components. I will write event.bind.ex and then I will have a self-closing tag called event.bind.ex. Let me save this one. In the event.bind.ex.js, I will add a button called click me. If I want to have a button, I will have the button tag, and for the button tag, I will provide the value as click me. Let me save the event.bind.ex.js, app.js. Let me go to the browser. You can see we have a button with the value as click me. In event.bind.ex.js, let's create a state property called message and bind it to the user interface. So in the component, I am going to add a constructor using the snippet. If I want to have a constructor using the snippet, I need to type rconst. So before the render method, I will type rconst and press enter. Now you can see we have a constructor. Within the constructor, a call to super and a state property called message to be initialized with a statement called welcome to Parnika tutorial. So in the this dot state, I will have a message and the message will be initialized with welcome to Parnika tutorials. And in the render method, I will have a div tag. Inside the div tag, I will write this dot state dot message. So within the div tag, I will have one more div tag and then I will open the curly braces and then I will write this dot state dot message. Let me save this one and let me save the app.js. Now go to the browser. You can see welcome to Parnika tutorials message and the click me button. Once user clicks this button called click me, I want to change the message to thank you for visiting Parnika tutorials instead of welcome to Parnika tutorial. So this should happen once the user clicks on the button called click me. So what I need to do, I need to use the event handlers. So in the button tag, I will have a on click event and then I will write this dot click handler. Now let me define the click handler method. Before the render method, let me define the click handler method, and inside the method I will use the set state. So I will write this dot set state, and then I will use the message. Now I will change the state to thank you for visiting Parnika tutorials. Let me save this one. Let me save the app.js. Let me go to the browser. We have welcome to Parnika tutorials. Now if I click on this button called click me, you can see we got an error, uncaught runtime errors, and the error you can read it as this is undefined. To make you understand this issue in detail, let me comment this dot state in the click handler. I will simply write console.log this. So I will write console.log, and then I will give the this. Let me save this one, go to the browser, let me go to the inspect and then console, and then let me click on this button. Now you can see undefined. If you don't bind this keyword with the event handler, then it will point to undefined in the callback. This is the JavaScript specific behavior and it is not related to React. So in React.js, we need to bind event so that this keyword would not return an undefined. Now let me discuss what are the various ways we can bind the event handlers. The first way is use the bind keyword and bind the handler in the render method. So you can use the bind keyword and bind the handler in the render method itself. The second way is use the arrow function in the render method. And the third way is binding the event handler in the constructor. This method is very famous one and lot of people will use. Even if you look at the React document also, they have provided this way of binding the event handler. So how can you bind it? Binding the event handler in the constructor. And the fourth way is use an arrow function as a class property. So first let me discuss the first way of binding the event handlers. What is the first way? Use the bind keyword and bind the handler in the render method. To do this one, let me go to the Visual Studio, and then on click I will write this dot click handler dot bind. Within the braces I will use this keyword. So I will write bind. So this dot click handler dot bind, and then I'm binding this keyword, and then I will uncomment this dot set state, all these things. Let me delete this one. So let me save the event bind ex.js, app.js. Let me go to the browser. You can see welcome to Parnika tutorials, and you can see a button called click me. Once user clicks on this button, the content will be displayed as thank you for visiting Parnika tutorials. If you want to observe, let me click on this button. Now you can see thank you for visiting Parnika tutorials. So now you can observe this keyword in the console is not undefined anymore. So this is the one way we can bind the event handler. So use the bind keyword and bind the handler in the render method. Although this option works perfectly, however, every update to the state will cause the component to be re-rendered. So whenever you are doing any updates, then what will happen is that it will re-render. This in turn will regenerate a brand new event handler on every render. So for a small project it is okay, but if you are using a big project, then it will be a typical issue. Now let me discuss the second way of binding the event handlers. Use the arrow function in the render method. The arrow function approach is a simple calling the event handler in the arrow function body. Let me do that one. So I will go to the Visual Studio. In the event bind ex, on the button on click, I will make this as an arrow function. So I will remove this entire one. I will use the arrow function. I will open the curly braces and I will open the braces, and then I will use the arrow operator, and then I will write this dot click handler. So if you notice that we don't need curly braces on the return keyword for the arrow function body because the function body is a single statement. Okay, let me save this event bind ex.js app.js. Let me go to the browser. Now you can see welcome to Parnika tutorials and you have a button. Let me click on this button. Now you can see we got the output as thank you for visiting Parnika tutorials. So the event binding has happened successfully. So we can bind the event handlers using the arrow function in the render method. Similar to the first approach, this also has a performance implications. So let me discuss the third way of binding the event handlers. We can bind the event handlers in the constructor. You can see the third one is binding the event handler in the constructor. Let me go to the event bind ex.js. In the constructor, we simply add this dot click handler is equal to this dot click handler dot bind this. So instead of binding it in the render method, I will bind in the constructor. So I will write this dot click handler is equal to this dot click handler dot bind, and then I will use the this. In the render method, I will use on click. I will write simply call the click handler. So let me delete entire one. Let me write this dot click handler. Let me save this one. App.js also let me save it. And let me go to the browser. You can see the message as welcome to Parnika tutorials. Once I click on this button called click me, now you can see thank you for visiting Parnika tutorials we got. Among all the four methods, whatever I'm telling, use the bind keyword and bind the handlers in the render method, use the arrow function in the render method, binding the event handler in the constructor, use an arrow function as a class property. Among all the four ways of binding the event handlers, this way of handling is very easy and lot of people will prefer binding the event handler in the constructor. And even this way of binding the event handler is provided in the React.js documentation. Because the binding happen once in the constructor, this is better compared to the binding in the render method. Now let me discuss the fourth way of binding the event handlers. Use an arrow function as a class property. So let me comment the this dot click handler is equal to this dot click handler dot bind of this. Let me comment this one and let me delete this click handler method, or I can comment that one also, and then simply I will write click handler is equal to, I will have the arrow function and then I will open the curly braces and then I will write this dot set state, open the braces, open the curly braces, and then I will simply initialize the message to thank you for visiting Parnika tutorials. Let me save this one, go to the browser and let me click on this button called click me. Now let me click on this button called click me and you can see we got the output as thank you for visiting Parnika tutorials. So these are the four ways we can bind the event handlers in React.js. What are the four ways? Use the bind keyword and bind the handler in the render method. Use the arrow function in the render method. Bind the event handler in the constructor. Use an arrow function as a class property. I hope you have understood all the concepts I have discussed in this video. If you still have any doubts related to this concept, feel free to ask me in the comment section. I will try to clear your doubts as early as possible. Thank you for watching the complete video. Have a nice day.